Hey guys, tonight we are going to do something a little different. We're not visiting a battlefield or a royal court. Instead, we're going to step into a place of quiet, a place of knowledge, a place that should feel calming but is, in this particular era, a source of profound, deep, and maddening frustration. We are going to visit a library in the 1872, right before a quiet revolution changed it forever. You'll be looking for a single book, and I have to warn you, the odds are not in your favor. You'll probably just end up lost, sleepy, and covered in a fine layer of historic dust. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It truly helps the channel find other people who enjoy these quiet journeys into the past. While you're at it, I'd love to know where you're re-listening from. Go ahead and leave a comment with your city and what time it is for you right now. It's always a little magical to see this community listening together from all across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is thick with the sweet, dry scent of aging paper and leather. Sunlight, heavy with dancing dust motes, streams through a tall, arched window, but it doesn't reach the deep shadows between the towering wooden shelves. You're standing just inside the entrance of a college library, a place that's supposed to be a temple of learning, but right now, it feels more like a warehouse for forgotten words. Your mission is simple. You need to find a book on Roman architecture, not a specific, obscure text, just something, anything, really. You have a paper to write, and you need some references. So you approach the front desk, where a stern Minos-looking man with spectacles perched on the end of his nose is meticulously dipping a pen into an inkwell. He is the librarian. He is the gatekeeper. And his mind, you are about to discover, is the only real catalog this library possesses. You clear your throat softly. Excuse me, sir. I'm looking for books on Roman architecture. He looks up, peering over his glasses, and his expression is one of mild annoyance, as if you've just asked him to personally rearrange the entire solar system. He thinks for a moment, tapping his chin. Yes, Petrovius, he mutters to himself. We have a copy. Let's see. He doesn't consult a card catalog because one doesn't exist in a way you'd recognize. He doesn't look at a chart. He simply stares into the middle distance, accessing the sprawling, chaotic map of this library that exists only in his memory. Alcove C, he says finally. Third shelf from the top. It should be about halfway down. It's a brown book, next to a green one on botany. You thank him and head off into the labyrinth. Alcove C. The shelves are labeled with faded, N-painted letters. As you walk, you notice there's no rhyme or reason to the arrangement. A book on French poetry is squeezed next to a treatise on steam engines. A collection of Greek tragedies is propping up a thin volume about North American birds. This is the core of your problem. This is a library with a fixed location system. Books were shelved where they fit, not by what they were about. When the library acquired a new book, it simply went into the next available space on the shelf. The only person who knew where anything was the man at the front desk. You find Alcove C. It's even darker here. You crane your neck to see the third shelf from the top. It's high. You drag over a heavy wooden stool, the legs scraping loudly across the floorboards, the sound echoing in the silence. Climbing up, you run your fingers along the spines of the books. The dust is thick, velvety. You sneeze. Brown book, next to a green one. You see several brown books, and several green ones. You pull one out. The cover is plain, unmarked leather. You open it. It's in German, and it appears to be about surgical techniques. You slide it back carefully. This was the quiet chaos of the 19th century library. In fact, some libraries, in an attempt to create some semblance of order, resorted to methods that seem bizarre to us now. It's a quirky little fact that many librarians arranged books simply by size, from tallest to shortest, to give the shelves a neat, uniform appearance. Others arranged them by the color of their binding. It was all about aesthetics. not access. The idea that a visitor-ray student like you should be able to find a book on their own was a radical, and frankly, unpopular concept. And here is where historians still have a bit of a debate. While the popular image is one of pure, unadulterated chaos, some scholars argue that many smaller, private libraries had their own unique and perfectly functional systems. They were idiosyncratic, known only to the owner and their librarian, but they worked for them. The real problem was just a lack of order, but a lack of a universal, standardized order that could be applied anywhere, by anyone. You're still on the stool, pulling out another brown book. This one is about English law. You sigh, a soft puff of air that disturbs the dust around you. You can't even imagine how you'd begin to browse, to just stumble upon something interesting. Every book is an island, completely disconnected from its intellectual neighbors. The book on steam engines has nothing to say to the French poetry next to it. It's a silent, lonely crowd. Defeated, you climb down from the stool. Maybe you'll try to find the botany section and work backward from the green book the librarian mentioned. But where would that be? It could be anywhere. You wander down another aisle, the towering shelves seeming to lean in toward you. You feel small, lost in this vast, disorganized ocean of human knowledge. Your simple quest for a book on architecture has become an impossible expedition. You lean your head against a cool, wooden shelf, the smell of old paper filling your senses. The frustration is tired. It's a quiet, heavy exhaustion. And in this moment, you don't feel like writing a paper. You just feel like closing your eyes. As you let the quiet frustration of that library wash over you, let your mind drift away from the towering, disorganized shelves. Let the image fade. We're going to travel back in time just a little, and a few hundred miles to the east, to a small town in upstate New York. It's the 1850 seconds. The world is crackling with new energy, but here, life is still measured and quiet. And I want you to picture a boy. You see him not in a library, but in his own home, and you notice immediately that there is something intensely, almost enervingly methodical about him. His name is Melvil Dewey, and for him, the world is a series of problems waiting to be solved, systems waiting to be created. You watch him as he goes about his chores. When he stacks firewood, he doesn't just throw it in a pile. He arranges it by size, by wood type, by dryness. He creates a system. When he organizes the family pantry, he groups items not just by what they are, but by how often they are used. The things needed daily are at the front. The things for special occasions are in the back. Efficiency. To you, it looks like a simple, neat pantry. To him, it's a perfectly calibrated machine for living. This boy is obsessed with two things above all else: order and the saving of time. He sees wasted time as the ultimate sin. He measures everything. You can almost imagine him with a little notepad, timing how long it takes to walk to school by different routes, calculating the most efficient path down to the second. He sees the world not as a beautiful, chaotic poem, but as a giant, inefficient machine that he, personally, has been called to fix. And this brings us to his other, more peculiar obsession: spelling. You say, young Melville looks at the English language and sees a disaster of inefficiency. Why should laugh have a th at the end when an f would do? Why the silent k? No. To him, these are not charming quirks of history. They are wasteful, illogical burdens on communication. This fascination is a wonderfully weird little fact about him. He would spend a significant portion of his life campaigning for simplified spelling. He even tried to streamline his own name, eventually shortening Melville to Melville, dropping his middle name, and for a time, even spelling his surname as Dewey. It didn't stick, but it gives you a perfect window into his mind if it can be made shorter, simpler, and more logical. It must be done. You watch him now as he sits with a book, but he isn't just reading the story. You see his eyes narrow, his brow furrow. He is deconstructing it. He is thinking about the paper, the binding, the typeface. He's thinking about how the information is organized. He is drawn to catalogs, to encyclopedias, to anything that takes the messy sprawl of human knowledge and attempts to place it into neat little boxes. While other boys might be collecting stamps or birds' eggs, Melvil is collecting systems. He is mentally cataloging the world. And this is where historians and biographers have a quiet debate. What was driving this young man? Was this intense need for order or for honor of what we might now diagnose as an obsessive-compulsive tendency? Some have argued that his rigid personality and his inability to tolerate disorder suggest a neurological underpinning for his genius. Or, as other scholars suggest, was he simply a perfect product of his time? This was the Gilded Age, an era of invention, of industrialization, of the efficiency expertend, the time minuscule. Perhaps he wasn't an outlier, but rather the ultimate expression of a culture that was falling in love with the idea of scientific management. The truth, as is often the case, is likely somewhere in between. We can't put a modern label on a mind from the past, but we can see the results of its unique wiring. As you observe him, you realize he would have been horrified by the library you were just in. Not just annoyed or frustrated, horrified. To him, a book that be found was more than an inconvenience. It was a failure of the entire system, a betrayal of the knowledge contained within its pages. What is the point of writing and printing a book if it's just going to get lost on a shelf, placed randomly by its size or color? It is an offense against logic itself. You see him get a part-time job as a teenager at a local general store. And what does he do? He completely reorganizes the stockroom. He creates a flow, a system, so that the owner knows exactly what he has and where to find it. The owner is probably just happy to have a tidy stockroom. But for Melvil, it's rehearsal. It's practice for a much larger stage. HES growing up. HES saving money for college. His mind constantly worrying, sorting, classifying. He looks out at the world and sees chaos. But unlike most people, who simply accept it, Melvil is energized by it. He sees it as his calling. You get the sense that this young man isn't just going to college to learn. He's going there to fix it. And as he packs his bags for immersed college, you can feel it in the air. A great disorder, dusty destiny awaits him. He is the man of order, and he is about to walk straight into the heart of chaos. The year is 1870. You are 20 years old, and you are no longer just observing Melvil Dewey. You are inside his mind. You've made it to Amherst College in Massachusetts, a place of sharp art and intellectual rigor. But you haven't come here just to study mathematics and languages. You've come because Amherst has a library, and you, Melvil Dewey, are drawn to a library like a detective to a crime scene. And this place, to your mind, it's a catastrophe. From your first day as a student assistant in the library, a quiet, methodical rage begins to build in your soul. It's a cold, precise anger, not a hoen. You've been given a sacred trust to work among these 20. Other volumes, and all you can see is squandered potential. The head librarian is a good man, a knowledgeable man, but his system, the one used by most libraries of the era, is an affront to everything you believe in. Let's walk through the process together. A student comes to the desk and asks for a copy of Darwin's On the Origin of Species. You can't just go to a science section. No such thing exists. Instead, you turn to a large, leather-bound ledger. This is the accession catalogue. You flip through the brittle pages, looking for Darwin. You find the entry. Next to the title is a number Uliopa. This number means it was the 682nd book the library ever acquired. It tells you nothing about the book's subject. It is merely a timestamp of its arrival. Now you take this number, Uliopa, and go to a second ledger. This one is organized by accession number. You run your finger down the columns. Uliopa-ling, Uliopa-yo. Here it is, Uliopa. And next to that number is its physical location, alcove G. Shelf 4, book A. You have now spent several minutes just to find a code that tells you where the book is physically sitting. You then have to walk to alcove G, count for shelves up, and 8 books over. And there it is. And what is it sitting next to? A book of German poetry and the history of the British monarchy. They have nothing in common except for the fact that they arrived at the library around the same time. Every time you do this, a part of you dies. The wasted steps, the the illogical sequence, the utter dependence on these two ledgers. If there were a fire and those ledgers burned, the library S-order, such as it is, would be lost forever. The knowledge of where things are would simply evaporate. Here's a quirky and maddening little detail of this system that keeps you awake at night. The shelves are organized by subject, but only in the broadest, most informal sense. Alcove C might be theology, but what happens when alcove C is full? When a new book on theology arrives, you can't go there, so the librarian just has to decide where it goes. It ends up in Alcoveville, which is supposed to be for geography, because there was a gap on a shelf. The only record of this is a small, penciled note in the margin of the ledger. The system is constantly being patched with these little exceptions, each one a tiny crack in an already crumbling foundation. It relies entirely on the memory of the librarian. This isn't a system, it's a tightrope walk. Historians and library scientists still debate the exact atmosphere in places like the Amherst Library. Was your frustration, Melville's frustration, truly unique? Or was everyone quietly miserable? Some argue that the librarians of the days are no major problem. They were custodians of books, not facilitators of information retrieval. Their job was to guard the books, not make them easily accessible to undergraduates. Others believe that many librarians were acutely aware of the system's flaws, but felt powerless to change it. They were wrapped in a tradition that stretched back centuries. Your genius, then, wasn't necessarily in seeing the problem, but in possessing the almost arrogant conviction that you, a young student assistant, could solve it for everyone. You spend your days fetching books, your mind a whirlwind of silent complaint, but you are also observing, collecting data. You notice how people ask for books. Sometimes they know the author, sometimes they only know the subject. A student doesn't say, "I'd like accession number 7314. They say, "I need something on the history of France under the current system." This request is nearly impossible to fulfill. You would have to personally know every single book in the building related to France. You start making lists. You categorize the books you handle in your own private notebook. You group them by subject, ignoring their accession numbers and their physical locations on the shelves. You create a category for philosophy, a category for science, a category for art. You're building a new library on paper, a ghost library that is logical, intuitive, and infinitely superior to the one you are forced to work in. The frustration is becoming a physical thing. You can feel it in your bones. It's a low hum of inefficiency that follows you even after you leave the library for the day. While your classmates are studying, you are wrestling with the grand, chaotic puzzle of human knowledge. How do you impose a lasting, flexible, intuitive order on it all? The problem consumes you. You lie in bed at night, not thinking of girls or grades, but of books. You see them all, floating in a great, dark void, and you are desperately trying to find the invisible strings that connect them. There has to be a better way, and the thought that you might be the one to find it is both terrifying and exhilarating. The weight of the problem follows you everywhere. It sits with you at meals. It walks with you across the college green. And so, on a quiet Sunday morning, you seek refuge. You're sitting in a hard, unforgiving wooden pew in the Amherst College church. The air is cool and still, smelling faintly of old wooden timber. The minister's voice rises and falls in a steady, predictable rhythm. This is supposed to be an hour of peace, a time to let your overactive mind rest. But you can't. Even here, surrounded by piety and quiet contemplation, your brain is back in the library stacks. You are mentally rearranging shelves, picturing the chaos, feeling that familiar thrum of frustration. You've thought about all the existing theories for organizing knowledge. There's the famous system of Francis Bacon, who divided all knowledge into 3 categories based on the faculties of the mind: memory for history, imagination for poetry, and reason for philosophy. It's elegant, it's intellectually beautiful, and for arranging physical books on a shelf, it's completely useless. Where does a book about the geology of the Andes fit? Is that memory? Reason? It's too abstract. You need a system that works in wooden paper. not just in theory. The sermon is long. You feel your focus drifting, your thoughts becoming a hazy blur. The minister is making a point, numbering his arguments. His voice cuts through your mental fog. And thirdly, he drones. Your mind latches onto the word. Thirdly, 1, 2, 3. A simple, linear progression, the most basic organizational tool known to man. And then, it happens. It's not a lightning bolt. It's quieter, but far more profound. It's the sudden, stunning realization that the solution is not in complex, philosophical trees, but in the brutal, beautiful simplicity of elementary school arithmetic. The 10 digits. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9. You have 10 fingers. You have 10 toes. The entire Western world counts in a base minus 10 system. It is the closest thing to a universal language you can think of. What if you could map the entirety of human knowledge onto those 10 simple digits? Your heart begins to beat faster. The minister's voice is just a background hum now. Your mind is on fire. You grab the little church program from the holder in front of you. You can't stop this. You have to get it down. You think of the main branches of knowledge you've been wrestling with in your notebooks. Okay, let's make 10 main classes. Just 10. Start broad. Let's put the most general things first. So, Zaro can be for general works encyclopedias, newspapers, things that contain a little bit of everything. Then you move to the internal world of man. Yaolindu. That can be philosophy and psychology, the study of the mind. Then you have the spirit. Adindu, religion. Then man in society. Sanlindu, social sciences. Then communication. Silindu, language. Then the world of nature. Odindu, natural sciences and mathematics. Then how we apply that science. Dolindu, technology and applied science. Then how we express our creativity. Sidamneu, the arts and recreation. Then our stories. Badingdi, literature. And finally, our past and our place. Jodingdeo, history and geography. It's all there, in 10 simple groups. You've created a home for every possible subject. A book is no longer defined by when it arrived or how tall it is. It is defined by what it is. A book on French history and a book on Roman history, no matter when they were acquired or what color their binding is, will now sit together in the 900 seconds. And this is where the second, even more brilliant part of the idea crashes into you. The real magic, the thing that will make this system last forever, the decimal point. What if you need to get more specific? That's where the current systems fail. But with a decimal, you have infinite space, infinite granularity. 500 is science, but you can make 510 mathematics, 520 astronomy, 530 physics. You're not just labeling, you're recreating a logical hierarchy. But what if you need to go deeper? 531 is classical mechanics, 531.1 is kinematics, 531.16 is dimensional analysis. You can keep adding numbers after the decimal point forever. As knowledge grows and becomes more specialized, your system can grow right along with it. It will never be full. It will never break. It is a living system. Right here, in this boring church service, is where the story gets a little fuzzy, and where historians love to have a good, gentle argument. Did it all truly come to you in one single, divine flash of inspiration, as you, Melvil, would claim for the rest of your life? It makes for a fantastic story, The Heavens Party. The idea delivered whole, but modern scholars tend to be a bit more skeptical. They suggest this was less a moment of pure invention and more a moment of powerful synthesis. You had been doing the work for months, filling notebooks, making lists. The sermon wasn't the lightning. It was the catalyst that fused all your hard work into a single, coherent whole. You don't care about any of that right now. You are frantically scribbling on the back of your program, your handwriting getting sloppier with excitement. You've almost forgotten where you are. The minister says a final prayer. The organ swells. People begin to stand up, shuffling out of the pews, thinking about their Sunday lunch. You remain seated for a moment, looking at the scrap of paper in your hand. The frustration is gone, the anger is gone. In its place is a deep, quiet, profound sense of calm, of certainty. You have done it. You have found the order in the chaos. You have created a system that is simple, universal, and infinite. You walk out of the church, blinking in the bright afternoon sun. You are just a 20-year-old college student, but you are holding a key that you believe can unlock and organize the entire world of knowledge. The walk back from the church is a blur. The sermon, the hymns, the faces of your classmates, they've all faded into an indistinct murmur. The only thing that feels real is the crumpled church program in your hand, now covered in what looks like the cryptic scribblings of a madman. You get back to your room at the dormitory, the door clicking shut behind you, and the silence amplifies the frantic energy buzzing in your veins. You smooth the paper out on your small wooden desk. There it is, the seed of it all. 10 simple categories. Now, the real work begins. An idea born in a moment of inspiration is one thing. A functional, robust system is another entirely. You take a clean sheet of paper. Your handwriting, usually so precise and controlled, is energized, lucid and normal. You are going to build the house that will contain all knowledge. First, you lay the foundation. You reaffirm your 10 primary divisions. This is the bedrock. You are no longer just assigning them numbers. You are giving them names, defining their borders. Zero generalities. You start here. You know you need a category for works that are too broad to fit into any single subject. This is your grand vestibule. Encyclopedias, which contain information on everything from aardvarks to zithers, go here. Newspapers, with their daily chaotic mix of politics, sports, and local news, also belong in the zeros. It's a catch-minus-all, a place for beginnings. It's a bit of a quirky and delightful feature of your system that this class also becomes a home for some of the strangest topics. A century from now, books on unsolved mysteries, UFOs, and Bigfoot who find it comfortable, if slightly odd, home in the 0 seconds. It's the library's cosmic junk drawer, and it's an absolutely necessary one. Then you decide on a grand, philosophical progression. Your system won't be random. It will tell a story, the story of humanity. 100 philosophy psychology. You start with the individual mind. Before there is society or science or art, there is the thinking person. This is the class for the big questions. Who are we? Why are we here? How does our mind work? It's the most abstract, the most internal. 200 religion. From the inner world of the self, you move to the inner world of the spirit. Here you place the systems of belief that have guided humanity for millennia. Mythology, theology, the great world, religions, they all find a home here, and is right here, as you confidently sketch out this category, that you unknowingly create one of the most significant and debated aspects of your system. You are a product of your time and place in 19th-century Protestant America. So in your initial design, you dedicate the vast majority of this class, from 220 to 280, specifically to Christianity. All other world religions are condensed into the 290 seconds. Historians and librarians will argue for the next 150 years about this choice. Was it a conscious bias, or simply a pragmatic reflection of the collection at Amherst College? It's a debate that continues to this day, a perfect example of how no classification system can ever be truly neutral. It will always reflect the worldview of its creator. But you're not worried about that now. You're building. You move on. After the individual and the spiritual, what comes next? Society. 300 social sciences. This is how we live together. Law, government, economics, education, the systems we build to keep chaos at bay. It's the logical next step. 400 language. And how do we build those societies? We communicate. Here you place linguistics, dictionaries, and grammars for all the world's tongues. You pause, looking at your first 5 classes. 0 through 400. You have covered the general, the internal, and the social worlds of man. There's a satisfying logic to it. Now, you turn your gaze outward, to the world around us. 500 Natural Science. This is the realm of pure knowledge about the physical universe. Mathematics, astronomy, physics, chemistry, biology, the wonders of the world. 600 Technology Applied Sciences. And what do we do with that pure knowledge? We use it. We build things. This is the what we do with it category. Medicine, engineering, agriculture, manufacturing. It's the practical application of the 500 seconds. The pattern is holding. Pure science, then applied science. You feel a surge of satisfaction. The next pairing comes just as naturally. 700 The arts recreation. After all the thinking and building, what do we do for joy, for beauty? Here you place architecture, sculpture, painting, music, and even sports. It is the realm of human expression and leisure. 800 Literature. And what is the most profound form of expression? The stories we tell. Here is where poetry, plays, and fiction will live. A place for the imagination. 900 History Geography. And finally, you create a place to record it all. The story of where we have been and where we have lived. This category grounds everything else in time and space. You lean back in your chair. It's done. 10 classes, logically ordered, that seem to encompass the entire universe of recorded thought. It flows from the general to the specific, from the internal to the external, from idea to application to expression to record. It's more than a list. It's an architecture, a grand, sweeping structure that is both simple on the surface and profoundly complex beneath. For the first time, you feel you have truly wrestled the chaos of the library into submission. Not just in a flash of inspiration, but on paper, in a clear, defensible, and beautifully logical order. You stare at the 10 classes spread before you on the desk. They are the pillars of your temple of knowledge. Now you have to build the rooms within. You decide to start at the beginning. At that strange and wonderful category you've designated 0 generalities. It feels right. Every good story starts at the beginning. And every library, you reason, needs a front door. This first category is your solution to a fundamental problem that plagued all previous systems. What do you do with a book that is about everything? You pick up the heavy, multi-volume encyclopedia sitting on the corner of your desk. You flip through a volume. Here is an entry on Aristotle philosophy. 100 seconds. A few pages later, an entry on architecture of the arts. 700 seconds. Then another on astronomy science. 500 seconds. To place this book in any single one of those categories would be to lie, to deny its very nature. It defies a single subject. So you create a home for the defiant. The 0 seconds are for the polymathists, the generalists, the books that are too big minus cell to be tied down. You begin to subdivide. 10 will be for bibliography, quite literally. Books about other books. This is a wonderfully meta idea that appeals to your orderly mind. A catalogue of all the books ever written on Shakespeare wouldn't go with his plays in the 800 seconds. It would go here, in the 10 seconds. You are creating a library for the tools that run libraries. 20 becomes library information sciences. You are, in effect, carving out a space for yourself, for the profession you are trying to revolutionize. It's a quiet, confident, and slightly self-serving move. You believe librarianize is a science, and now it has its own number. 30 is for general encyclopedias. 50 for general periodicals, like magazines and journals. 70 for news media, journalism, and publishing. It's all very neat, very logical. The 0 seconds are becoming the library's central nervous system, handling all the information that is about information itself. But, as you sketch out this framework, you unknowingly create something else. Something that will become a source of quiet amusement and fascination for library wanderers a century from now. You are creating the official home for the weird. Think about it. Where do you put a book about a topic that is, by its very nature, unproven and speculative? A book about ghosts or psychic phenomena. Is it religion? 200 seconds. No, quite. Is it psychology? 100 seconds. The scientists would be outraged. It doesn't fit. It belongs to no established discipline. So where does it go? It goes into your brilliant catch minus all. This is the quirky secret of the 0 seconds. In the future, this class will house not just encyclopedias, but sections like 1.9 controversial knowledge. This is where future librarians will shelve books on UFO sightings, the Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, and other unsolved mysteries. You have, without meaning to, created the official paranormal section, the island of misfit topics. And this leads to one of the most interesting and ongoing debates about your system. As used there in 1872, you see the 0 seconds as a small, essential, but ultimately limited category. You cannot possibly foresee the single biggest explosion of knowledge in human history, the computer. In your world, a computer is a person who performs calculations. The idea of a machine that can process information would be pure fantasy. So when computers do arrive, the librarians who come after you will face a monumental problem. Where do they put computer science? Is it a branch of mathematics 510 seconds? Yes, in part. Is it a form of engineering 620 seconds? That too. Does it relate to language 400 seconds through its coding languages? Absolutely. It's a discipline that touches everything. And so, after years of debate, a decision was made. Computer science was placed in the 0 seconds, specifically in the 4, and 6 sections. Librarians and information scientists still argue about this. Is computer science truly a generality in the same way an encyclopedia is? Or did it land here simply because there was nowhere else for such a revolutionary and cross-disciplinary field to go? Some argue it was a stroke of genius, recognizing that computing is fundamentally about the manipulation of information itself, making it a perfect, if modern, fit for the 0 seconds. Others contend it was a pragmatic kludge, a patch forced onto your 19th-century system by a 20th-century reality you could never have imagined. It's a quiet controversy that lies on the spines of library books. You, of course, are blissfully unaware of any of this future turmoil. Your pen moves across the page with confidence. You see your 0 class as a clean, elegant solution. It's the trunk of your tree of knowledge, the sturdy base from which all the other branches will grow. It feels complete. It feels correct. You have created a place for everything that is about everything, and a place for everything that is about nothing yet proven. You look at your work, a deep sense of satisfaction warming you. The foundation is laid. Now, it's time to build the first floor of the human mind. Having laid the foundation with the 0 seconds, the grand, sturdy trunk of your knowledge tree, you feel a sense of profound readiness. It's time to build the first major branch. It seems only natural, almost poetically so, that after the general, you must start with the specific and the source of all knowledge itself, the human mind. You dip your pen in the inkwell, the scratchy sound sharp in the quiet of your room, and you write down the heading 100 Philosophy Psychology. You conceive of this as the class of the self. Before humanity built cities or wrote poems, it first had to think. This is where you will house the raw material of consciousness. You subdivide it with a sense of architectural grace. 110 will be for metaphysics, the really big, abstract questions about the nature of being in the world. 120 for epistemology, the study of knowledge itself, a subject dear to your own heart. How do we know what we know? It's a beautifully recursive idea, a category about the very act of categorization. You then create 170 for it, the study of how we ought to behave. In your mind, you are building a logical progression. What is real? How do we know it's real? And therefore, how should we act? It is in this section that you also carve out a home for a relatively new and exciting field, psychology. At this time, it's not quite the distinct science it will become, often still considered a branch of philosophy, but you, with your eye always on the future, give it a place, and in doing so, you create a home for one of the library's most browsed and peculiar corners. This becomes the destination for a quirky kind of knowledge minus seeker. You decide that the 130 seconds will be the home for parapsychology and occultists. It's a fascinating choice. You aren't validating these topics as hard science, but you are creating a logical place to put books about them. So, a serious academic study of the Salem witch trials would go in history in the 900 seconds, but a book about the practice of witchcraft itself, a guide to reading tarot cards, that finds its home here in the 130 seconds. You've created a tidy, intellectual distinction between a historical phenomenon and a system of belief, neatly shelving the supernatural right next to the study of the mind. Feeling satisfied with your map of the human intellect, you move to its spiritual companion. It's the next logical step in your grand narrative of humanity. From the mind, you travel to the soul. You write 200 religion. Here, you set out to catalogue the great belief systems that have shaped civilizations. And in doing so, you make the single most controversial and lasting decision of your entire system. This is a core historical fact of the Dewey Decimal Classification. Being a devout Christian in 19th-century America, you build the 200 seconds to reflect the world as you know it. You dedicate 220 entirely to the Bible. 230 is for Christian theology. 240 for Christian moral practice. 250 for the Christian local church. 260 for Christian social theology. 270 for the history of the Christian church. 280 for Christian denominations. The vast, intricate architecture of Christianity gets nearly the entire class. And what about all the other faiths of the world? You gather them all up: Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Shintoism, everything, and you place them together in the final section, the 290 seconds. This is the point where, for over a century, librarians and scholars have engaged in a quiet, persistent debate. Was this an act of conscious cultural supremacy, an intellectual marginalization of non-Christian faiths? Or was it, as some historians argue, a purely pragmatic choice driven by your immediate circumstances? The argument for pragmatism is simple. You were designing this system in the Amherst College Library. You look at the shelves. The vast majority of the religious books in your collection are Christian texts. You are simply building a system to organize the books you actually have. Not all the books in the world in theory. To dedicate huge sections to religions for which the library held maybe 1 or 2 books would have seemed, to your efficiency minus obsessed mind, deeply illogical. The counter-argument, of course, is that a system designed for universal application should not be based on the contents of one small New England college library. Critics suggest that your personal worldview was so ingrained that you couldn't help but build it into the very DNA of your system, creating a framework that inherently privileged one viewpoint over all others. The debate continues to this day, a quiet intellectual ghost that haunts the 200-second section of every Dewey library. But for you, sitting at your desk in this moment, there is no controversy. There is only the satisfying click of order falling into place. The logic seems impeccable. You've journeyed from the thinking mind to the believing soul. You've taken the most profound, abstract, and emotional aspects of the human experience, our reason and our faith, and you've given them a number. You've given them a home. You've contained them in a neat, numerical box. You lean back, looking at the tidy columns on the page. The internal world of man is now mapped. You've mapped the internal worlds of philosophy and religion. You've corralled the most abstract concepts into neat numerical pins. A deep sense of satisfaction settles over you. The system is working. It feels strong, but as you sit there, admiring your handiwork, a new kind of anxiety, a familiar whisper of chaos, begins to creep in. Your 10 main classes are the pillars. The 100 divisions are the main rooms. But what happens inside those rooms? What happens when knowledge isn't content to be brought? Take your 500 class, natural science. You've designated 580 for plants botany and 590 for animal zoology. It's clean, it's simple, but then you pick up a book off your shelf. It's a detailed monograph, a scholarly work dedicated entirely to the anatomy of orchids. Where does it go? Does it just get lumped in with every other book on plants? From giant redwoods to humble mosses, to your mind, that's no better than the old system. It's still a form of chaos, a denial of specificity. The system needs to be able to grow not just outward, but inward. It needs to be able to handle not just the big subjects, but the tiny, intricate details. It needs to go deeper. And then you remember the second half of your revelation in the church. It wasn't just the 10 digits. It was the humble, unassuming dot, the decimal point. This is the moment where your system transforms from a good idea into a work of genius. You realize that the numbers on their own are just labels, but with the decimal point, they become a living, breathing organism. You have created a system with infinite hospitality. You grab a fresh sheet of paper, your excitement renewed. Let's follow the orchid book. The broadest category is 500 science. We move one step down into the room for plants 580 plants botany. But we're not done. We can add a decimal and go deeper. Inside botany, you can create new subdivisions. You decide that the specific kinds of plants can be organized by number. Perhaps you make 580 for monocotyl agents. Orchids are monocots. So now the book belongs in 584. But there are lots of monocots. You mean to go deeper still. You can add another digit. 580 for point 1 is perigales. That's the order orchids belong to. Still not specific enough. 580 for point 15 orchidaceae. The orchid family itself. You put down your pen and look at the number 584.15. It's beautiful. It's more than a cool number. It is the book's intellectual address. It tells you its great minus grandparent is science. Its grandparent is botany. Its parent is monocots. It tells the story of how that piece of knowledge fits into the grand, universal tree. And the best part? If someone discovers a new sub-minus family of orchids tomorrow, you don't have to redo the entire system. You simply add another digit, 584.15, and then 580 for 0.15. The numbers can stretch on forever, an infinite fractal of knowledge, getting more and more precise with each added digit. Here's a quirky little fact born from this invention, the almost comical length that some Dewey numbers can achieve. In the future, a highly specialized academic work, something like the sociological impact of 20th-century Brazilian television on rural farming communities, will have a call number so long it barely fits on the spine of the book. It might look like 306.45098.107. To an outsider, it's an absurd string of digits. But to you, and to the librarians who will follow you, it is a thing of beauty. Each number is a precise coordinate, a pin dropped on the vast map of human thought. With this decimal power, you can now move a book's location without changing its identity. In the old fixed location system, if you ran out of space on the botany shelf, the new orchid book had to go somewhere else entirely, breaking its connection to its subject. But in your system, the number 580 for 0.15 is the book's soul. It doesn't matter if it's on a shelf in the basement or on a special display table by the front door. Its number tells you it is, and always will be, a book about orchids. You have separated a book's intellectual identity from its physical one. This is where a subtle but fascinating historical debate emerges. You, Melvil, saw this numerical system as a step toward perfect, objective truth. The numbers are pure. They are logical. They create what you call universal language. A librarian in London and a librarian in Calcutta may not speak the same tongue, but they will both understand that 530 means physics. But later scholars would argue that this very elegance masks the system's inherent subjectivity. The decimal point creates an illusion of scientific precision, but the underlying structure, who gets a big number, who gets a small one, what is considered a main class, is still based on your 19th-century worldview. The debate is whether the decimal system is a truly objective tool, or if it's a very human, very biased map that has been cleverly disguised in the universal language of mathematics. You, however, are not troubled by such future philosophical debates. You are filled with a pure, terrifying power. You have done it. You have created a system that is both simple and infinitely complex. It is stable enough to last for centuries, yet flexible enough to accommodate knowledge that hasn't even been discovered yet. You can see the numbers stretching out before you, a shimmering web connecting every thought, every book, every idea. The chaos of the library has just been tamed. It has been transformed into a beautiful, logical, and endlessly explorable universe. You have it, the numbers, the decimals, an infinitely expanding architecture of knowledge that feels mathematically pure, almost perfect. Use it back in your chair, allowing yourself a rare moment of untroubled pride. You've built a magnificent, logical engine, but as the initial euphoria settles, a quiet unease begins to form. A nagging question echoes in the back of your mind, a voice that sounds suspiciously like the confused student you once were. You've built this beautiful engine, but you've forgotten to give anyone the key. Imagine a user walking into your perfectly organized library. They are looking for a book on birds. You, Melvil Dewey, know that the number for birds is 598, but the user doesn't know that. How could they? They don't have the entire map of knowledge memorized like you do. Are they supposed to wander the stacks, looking at the numbers on the spines, until they guess correctly? No, that's just a new kind of chaos. You've created a language, but you are currently its only speaker. Your system, as it stands, works beautifully from the inside out. If you have the number, you can find the book. But a library needs to work from the outside in. It needs to start with a person's simple question, with their words, and lead them to the right number. And so, you conceive of the second, equally brilliant, and often overlooked pillar of your invention. It's not a flashy idea. It's not about grand philosophical structures. It's a simple, practical, powerful tool. You decide to create an index, but not just any index. You will call it the relative index. You clear your desk and take out a new set of papers. This task requires a different kind of thinking. It's less about creation and more about connection. You begin to go through your classification system. But this time, you think in words, not numbers. You write down agriculture and next to it, it's number Leosanli. Then you write architecture and it's number Chiali. Astronomy Wadi. Athletics Chijolo. You continue this process, creating a massive alphabetical list of every subject you can think of and its corresponding numerical home. This is the mainstream historical fact that many people miss. The Dewey Decimal System is not just the numbers. It is a 2-part system. The numbers, the classification, are the shells. The index, the relative index, is the map. One is useless to the public without the other. As you build this index, you realize its true power. This is where you coin the term relative. The name itself is a stroke of genius. A book on a subject can be classified in different places depending on its focus. Take the subject of France. Your index won't just have one entry for it. Under France, you will list History of France, Joseph, French language, Sicily, French literature, Bosselin, Geography and travel in France, 914.4, French cooking, 641.594. The index shows the relationships between disciplines. It reveals that the idea of France isn't a single, monolithic topic but a rich concept scattered across your entire classification system. The user, by looking at this one entry, is given a complete tour of everything the library has on the subject. It doesn't just help them find a book, it helps them understand knowledge itself. Here's a wonderfully quirky detail that highlights your obsessive thoroughness. You realize that people use different words for the same thing. One person might look for farming, while another looks for agriculture. A less meticulous person might just list agriculture and be done with it. But not you. You create cross-minus references. In your index, under farming, you write the simple instruction, see agriculture. You build these little bridges everywhere. Currency says see money. Cost says see textiles. You are actively trying to anticipate every possible path a user's mind might take. In a very real sense, you are creating the world's first user-friendly search algorithm, written on paper. It is the 19th century version of Google, powered by ink and an alphabetical list. And this is where a fascinating debate among library historians still simmers. What was your greater achievement? Was it the elegant, hierarchical numbers, or was it this comprehensive, user-focused index. Some traditionalists argue that the classification itself, the structure of the 100 classes in the infinite decimal, is the true intellectual breakthrough. The index, they say, is just a helpful finding aid. But other scholars argue the exact opposite. They claim that many people had created philosophical maps of knowledge before. Your true revolution, they contend, was the relative index. It was the first tool that systematically and democratically connected a user's natural language to a library's complex internal structure. It's what made your system usable by everyone, not just trained librarians. It's what allowed for OpenStax, where people could finally browse for themselves. In this view, the index wasn't just the key to the engine, it was the entire dashboard. You, of course, see them as two inseparable halves of a perfect whole. You spend months, even years, refining this index, adding terms, making connections. It grows into a substantial book in its own right. It is tedious, painstaking work, but you are driven by a singular vision, a world where any person can walk into any library, and without any special training, find exactly what they are looking for. You are not just organizing books anymore. You are organizing access, and with the relative index complete, you feel your system is finally, truly ready. The year is 1876. You are 25 years old. The last few years have been a whirlwind of single-minded, ferocious work. You've refined your numbers. You've built your colossal relative index. You've tested it, debated it, and written it in the quiet confines of the Amherst Library. In your mind, you are not just holding a new idea for arranging books. You are holding the future. The system is elegant. It is logical. It is infinite. It is, to you, a thing of perfect and unassailable reason. Now, it's time to show it to the world. You get your chance at the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia. It's a grand affair, a celebration of America's 100th birthday and a showcase of its industrial and intellectual might. This is where the world is introduced to the telephone, to Heinz Ketchup, to the Remington typographical machine, your beloved typewriter. Amidst all this innovation, a group of the nation's most prominent librarians has gathered for a conference. This is your moment. This is your audience. These are the gatekeepers whose approval you need. You stand before them, a young man burning with an almost painful intensity. You are not a charismatic, slapping salesman. You are lean, serious, and you speak with a clipped, rapid fire urgency. You lay it all out for them. You describe the chaos of the fixed location system, the wasted time, the lost knowledge. You can feel the nods of agreement in the room. They know this pain. They live it every day. Then, you unveil your solution. You explain the 10 classes, the decimal point, the infinite expansion. You show them how a book on orchids gets its precise, unchanging number. You can see looks of cautious interest. But then you present your masterpiece, the relative index. You explain how any person, using their own words, can be guided to the exact right spot in the library. You explain how it creates a universal language. You finish your presentation, your heart pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and absolute conviction. You are offering them a key to escape their prisons of disorganization. You are offering them modernity. You expect, if not a standing ovation, then at least a wave of enthusiastic questions, a sense of shared discovery. Instead, you are met with a wall of silence. The silence is then broken, not by applause, but by the skeptical, slightly condescending voice of a senior librarian from a major Boston institution. He stands up, peers at you over his spectacles, and says something to the effect of, "Young man, you seem to have a great deal of enthusiasm. But this is not a factory we are running. It is a library. A library has a soul. Your numbers, they are cold. They are sterile." Another librarian chimes in. "And this decimal system, it's needlessly complicated. 584.15. My patrons will never understand such a thing. It's a ridiculous affectation." A third complains about the very idea of a universal system. "My library is unique," he says, puffing out his chest. "I have my own system. perfectly suited to my collection and my patrons. Why should I adopt this? This one minus size minus fits minus all solution from a young man who has only ever worked in one college library. The criticism is a tidal wave. They call it rigid, impersonal. They say it smells of the factory, of the assembly line. It turns the noble art of librarianize into a mechanical trade. They attack your simplified spelling in the pamphlet you printed, seeing it a sign of radicalism and a lack of scholarly seriousness. This is a wonderfully ironic and quirky fact of its reception. Many librarians were initially more offended by your attempt to spell dialogue as dialogue than they were intrigued by the system itself. And here, historians still debate the root of this powerful resistance. Was it simple conservatism, an ingrained reluctance to change the way things had always been done? Absolutely, that was part of it. But was it also a kind of professional snobbery? Many scholars argue that the old system, for all its chaos, gave the librarian an immense amount of personal power and prestige. The librarian was the only one who knew where the books were. He was the indispensable human catalogue, the master of the labyrinth. Your system threatened to take that power away. It democratized access. It implied that a trained librarian wasn't strictly necessary to find a book. By making the library easier for the patron, you are making the librarian seem less like a sage and more like a clerk. You are stunned. You are heartbroken. You have offered them a gift, and they have thrown it back in your face. They don't see the beauty, the logic. They only see a threat to their identity. You try to argue, to explain again, but their minds are closed. You are an outsider, an upstart, and your perfectly rational system feels like an attack on their entire profession. You leave the conference not as a celebrated innovator, but as a defeated visionary. You walk through the streets of Philadelphia, the sounds of the great exposition ringing around you, the clatter of new machines, the buzz of new ideas. But all you can feel is the sting of rejection. The very people you thought you were saving have become your staunchest opponents. You realize that inventing a solution is the easy part. The hard part is convincing the world to accept it. And your perfect, logical system now faces its most illogical obstacle, human nature. The sting of that public rejection in Philadelphia is a cold, hard lesson. It would have sent a less driven person back to their quiet library work, their grand ideas folded and tucked away in a drawer forever. But you are not a less driven person. You are Melvil Dewey, and if there is one thing that defines you even more than your love of order, it is your unshakable, almost fanatical, self-minus confidence. The librarians of America didn't understand. Fine, you would not try to persuade them anymore. You would simply have to raise a new generation of librarians who did. If the old guard won't learn your system, you will create a new one. Your journey takes you from Amherst to Boston, and then, in 1883, to a position of greater power and influence, chief librarian at Columbia College in New York City. The library is a mess, a carbon copy of the chaos you knew at Amherst, only larger. The trustees have hired you to fix it, and you arrive like a whirlwind of methodical energy. You immediately begin cataloging the entire collection, all 30. Thorough volumes according to your own decimal system. The old librarians grumble, but you now have the authority to ignore them. But cataloging Columbia is just a means to an end. Your real project, the one that burns in your mind, is the creation of a school, not just a class, but the world's first formal institution dedicated to the science of running a library, the Columbia School of Library Economy. You present your plan to the college's trustees. You envision a rigorous, professional program that will teach cataloging, classification theory, bibliography, and library administration. It will turn librarianize from a fusty, informal occupation into a modern, respected profession. And, of course, the curriculum will be built entirely around one classification system, yours. It's a brilliant, if audacious, Trojan horse. You are creating the very mechanism for your system's eventual triumph. The all-male board of trustees, impressed by your energy and the improvements you've already made, cautiously approves your plan. They envision a small, respectable program for a few scholarly young men. Then you drop the bombshell. You announce your intention to open admission to women. The reaction is immediate and explosive. It is one thing to have a woman working quietly as a low-minus paid copyist in the stacks. It is another thing entirely to admit them as formal students of Columbia College, to have them sitting in classrooms alongside men. The idea is scandalous. It is improper. It is, to many of the trustees, simply unthinkable. This is a mainstream, and frankly, quite astonishing part of your story. In an era where women were largely barred from higher education and professional life, you, Melvil Dewey, a man who in other aspects of his life could be rigid and conservative, become a radical champion for women in the workplace. The trustees forbid it. They tell you in no uncertain terms that Columbia College is for men, and your little library school will not be the exception. You are at an impasse. Your entire project is threatened, and here, your stubbornness becomes a force for historical change. You don't back down. You fight. You write letters. You argue in meetings. You use every bit of leverage you have. This is where a wonderfully humanizing, quirky detail emerges. Your argument wasn't just based on a modern ideal of equality. You were, above all, a pragmatist. You argued that the work of a librarian, the attention to detail, the patience, the focus on service and order was perfectly, almost naturally, suited to what was then considered the female temperament. Furthermore, you argued from an economic standpoint women could be paid less than men for the same work, making professional library services more affordable and allowing for the hiring of more staff. Historians still debate the nature of your advocacy. Was it a forward-minded thinking push for women's rights? Or was it a cold, practical calculation to get a dedicated, skilled, and cheap workforce to implement your system across the country? The truth is likely a messy combination of both. You genuinely believed women were capable, and you also saw them as the ideal foot soldiers for your decimal revolution. The battle with the trustees rages. They refuse to budge, so you resort to a clever, bureaucratic workaround. You decide to admit the women anyway, but you list them as being enrolled in the library staff training program, not as official Columbia students. It's a fudge, a piece of administrative sleight of hand. When the first class of the Columbia School of Library Economy opens in January of 1887, of the 20 students enrolled, 17 are women. You have defied the trustees and created the first co-minus educational graduate program in the country, almost by stealth. The classroom is a revelation. The women you've admitted are brilliant, motivated, and hungry for the professional opportunity they've been denied elsewhere. They absorb your theories on classification and indexing with a passion you never found among the old guard. They don't have to be persuaded that the old system is broken. They have no investment in it. They see the logic of your numbers, the power of the index. They are not just your students. They are your converts. You have found your army. You are forging them yourself in the basement of the Columbia Library, shaping the minds that will carry your decimal system out into the world. One library at a time. The victory is immense, but it has come at a cost. You have made powerful enemies. The trustees are furious at your insubordination. Your position at Columbia is becoming untenable. But as you look at the faces of your students, you feel it is a price worth paying. The old librarians in Philadelphia may have rejected you, but here, in this room, the future is taking notes. You have your school now, a hidden engine room in the depths of Columbia, forging the future leaders of your quiet revolution. You watch your students, so many of them bright, capable women, and you know they will be exceptional librarians. But as you look beyond the walls of your classroom, you see the same problem you faced in Philadelphia. You see a nation of libraries, but not a library system. Each one is an island, run according to the whims of its head librarian. Sending your graduates out one by one is like sending missionaries into a vast, unconnected territory. They need support. They need a unified cause. They need a banner to rally under. The rejection at the Centennial Conference in 1876 taught you a valuable lesson. The old guard was powerful because they were established, that they were not organized. Their opposition was a collection of individual grumbles, not a coherent philosophy. You realize you need to fight fire with fire, or rather, fight disorganization with organization. You need to create a body that will speak for the future, not the past. And so, with the same methodical fervor you apply to your decimal system, you become a primary force in the creation of the American Library Association, the ALA. You are not just a founder, you are its energetic, tireless secretary. The official mission of the ALA is lofty and noble to promote libraries, librarians, and library services in the United States. But for you, the mission is much more pointed. It's a vehicle. It's the platform from which you will launch a nationwide campaign for your true gospel, the gospel of standardization. To you, the decimal system is just the beginning. The real enemy is arbitrary variation in all its forms. You look at the libraries of America, and you see not just intellectual chaos, but physical chaos. One library builds its shelves 10 inches deep, another builds them 12 inches deep. One librarian writes catalog entries in a flowery, illegible script. Another uses a thick, blocky print. There is no uniformity. There is no efficiency. This obsession with uniformity is where we find a set of wonderfully quirky, almost comically specific details about your crusade. You, through the committees of the ALA, begin to advocate for standards on everything. You help establish the standard size for a library shelf. You even promote a specific style of handwriting, a clear, uniform script known as library hand, which all your students at Columbia are required to master. Your goal is that a catalog card written in Boston should be instantly legible to a librarian in Chicago. And that brings you to your masterstroke of standardization, an innovation as important as the decimal system itself, the standard minus-sized catalog card. Before you, library catalogs were often kept in large, bound ledger books. They were inflexible. You couldn't easily add a new entry in the middle or remove an old one. Your solution is the card catalog, a system of individual, removable cards stored in drawers. But for it to truly work on a national scale, every card must be exactly the same size. You and the ALA settle on a standard 7.5 centimeters by 12.5 centimeters, what the world would soon come to know as the 3x 5-inch index card. This seemingly minor decision is a revolution. It means that cards can be easily added, removed, and rearranged. More importantly, it means that cards can be shared. A central agency like the Library of Congress, or even a commercial enterprise could print thousands of cards for a new book and sell them to libraries across the country. You would save countless hours of redundant work. You haven't just created a convenience. You've created the technical foundation for a national information network. And here, as always, a quiet historical debate follows in your way. What was the true motivation behind this fanatical push for standardization? Was it the noble, selfless act of a visionary trying to build a better, more efficient world for all? That's one side of the story. You were professionalizing a field, creating interoperability, and saving public money. You were a true public servant. However, historians love to point out another, slightly less altruistic fact. You were not just a librarian. You were also a businessman. You were instrumental in founding a company called the Library Bureau. And what did the Library Bureau sell? Its old library supplies, its old oak card catalog cabinets, built to old standard minus-sized cards, its old pre-minus printed, standard minus-sized catalog cards, its old desks and chairs and shelving, all built to ALA minus approved standard dimensions. So, the debate becomes, was your crusade for standardization a visionary public service? Or was it the most brilliant marketing campaign of the 19th century? Were you creating standards for the public good? Or were you creating a captive market for your own company? The truth, as seen from the quiet distance of history, is that you probably didn't see a difference between the two. You believed so completely in your vision that you felt that what was good for the Library Bureau, the company that produced the tools of your modern library, was inherently good for every library in America. Your public mission and your private enterprise were, In your mind, two sides of the same logical, efficient coin. You now have your school to produce the librarians. You have your association to be their professional voice. And you have your standards to ensure they all operate within the same universe of supplies and systems. You are not just classifying knowledge anymore. You are classifying the entire profession. You are building the empire of order. And you are also building the company that sells the uniform. You've built an empire. You have your school turning out disciples. Your association shaping the profession. And your company selling the very furniture of the modern library. You, Melvil Dewey, are no longer just a librarian. You are a titan of the information age. A man whose name is becoming synonymous with the very concept of order. Your system is spreading, a testament to its elegant logic. And in this moment of triumph, it becomes necessary to step back and look at the man who built the system. Because the man is always more complex, more contradictory than the clean, rational system he creates. This is the part of any story where the light becomes a little dimmer, the shadows a little longer. To understand the legacy of Melvil Dewey, we have to look at the other side of his genius. The same relentless drive and absolute certainty that allowed you to impose order on a world of books also shaped your views on the world of people. And for a man obsessed with classification, you spent a great deal of your life sorting people into categories, often with troubling results. Away from the world of libraries, you poured your formidable energy into another grand project, the Lake Placid Club. You envisioned it as a perfect retreat in the Adirondack Mountains of New York, a resort built on your core principles of health, efficiency, and moral uplift. It was, in its own way, another system for living. But this perfect world you were building had a set of very strict, very clear rules about who was allowed to enter. This is a difficult but essential fact of your life, the Lake Placid Club. Your personal utopia actively exclude people based on their background. Most notably, it barred Jews, as well as black people and other minorities. You, the creator of a system meant to organize all of human knowledge, built a community that explicitly rejected entire segments of humanity. And this is where the quiet, and sometimes not minus quiet, debate among historians reside. It's a debate about how we should judge a historical figure. One school of thought argues that we must see you as a product of your time. Antisemitist and racism were, tragically, endemic in the society of late 19th century. Upper class, white America. These historians don't excuse your prejudices, but they frame them as a reflection of your era's ugly norms. They suggest your views were depressingly common, not uniquely monstrous, but another, and increasingly prominent, school of thought finds this explanation insufficient. They argue that you were not just a follower, you are a leader, a visionary, a man who built institutions from scratch. You didn't have to bake these prejudices into the foundations of your club. You chose to, for a man who dedicated his life to breaking with old, inefficient traditions. Your enthusiastic embrace of old, hateful traditions is a profound moral failure. This view holds that your bigotry wasn't just a footnote to your genius. It was a defining feature of your character that casts a dark shadow over all your accomplishments. The complexity doesn't end there. We must also return to the women you championed. You fought for their entry into the library profession, a radical act that changed countless lives. And yet, your personal behavior toward women was often deeply problematic. This is a quirky and disturbing paradox of your life. Throughout your career, you faced accusations of making unwanted physical advances and creating an environment where female colleagues felt deeply uncomfortable. Your unwelcome personal attention, as they were often euphemistically called, became so notorious that in 1905, you were eventually forced out of the American Library Association, the very organization you'd founded and poured your life into. How do we reconcile these two images? The progressive champion who opened doors for women, and the man whose personal behavior sullied the very profession he helped to mentor. Historians still grapple with this. Were you simply a man whose social awkwardness and obsessive personality translated into a frightening lack of respect for personal boundaries? Or was there something more predatory at play? We are left with a man who is a puzzle, a man of immense, world-changing vision who was also small-minded and prejudiced, a man who promoted women professionally while demeaning them personally, a man who created a universal system for knowledge but wanted to live in a closed, exclusive society. The legacy you leave behind is therefore a dual one. There is the system, the elegant, logical, and astonishingly durable Dewey Decimal Classification, a tool that has brought order to countless libraries and guided generations of seekers. And then there is the man brilliant, driven, and deeply, profoundly flawed. The question for history, the one we are left to ponder in the quiet of the night, is whether the two can ever be fully separated. Let's step away from the messy, uncomfortable complexities of your personal life for a moment onto the clean, satisfying world of your system. Your personal reputation may be facing storms, but the decimal system itself is moving like a quiet, unstoppable glacier, carving its way across the American landscape. Your school is producing its acolytes. The ALA is promoting your standards. But there is one final, crucial piece of the puzzle that ensures your system's ultimate victory. It's not a grand idea or a professional organization. It's a simple, humble, and powerfully pragmatic invention, the pre- printed standard catalog card. You're back in the mind of a librarian, but not a chief librarian in a major city. You are the sole librarian of a small, but growing public library in a dusty Midwestern town. You have a tiny budget and a mountain of work. Every month, a new crate of books arrives. A gift from a wealthy benefactor or a new purchase you painstakingly save for. And for every single book, you have to go through the same laborious process. You have to pick up the book, examine it, and decide what it's about. Then, you consult your copy of the Dewey Decimal Classification, the little blue book you bought after hearing a lecture from a Dewey graduate, and you assign it a number. Then you have to write out, by hand, using your best library hand script, at least 3 separate catalog cards, one for the author, one for the title, and one for the subject, for a single book. That's 10 to 15 minutes of painstaking work, and that's if you're equipped. When a crate of 50 books arrives, it represents days of work just to get them onto the shelves. This is the reality for thousands of librarians across the country, and this is the problem that your system, combined with your push for standardization, is perfectly poised to solve. The solution comes not from you directly, but from the institution that will become your system's greatest ally, the Library of Congress. In 1901, the Library of Congress begins a revolutionary service. They start printing and selling copies of their own catalog cards. And because you, through the ALA, have fought so hard to establish the 7.5 cm x 12.5 cm card as the national standard, these cards can be used by any library in America. This is the tipping point. This is the moment your system becomes irresistible. Now picture yourself back in that small town library. That same crate of 50 new books arrives. But this time, tucked inside the crate is another, smaller box. You open it, and inside are neat stacks of pre-printed cards. For the new biography of Abraham Lincoln, there are already 3 perfect cards. The author card, the title card, and the subject card. They are printed in crisp, clear type, and in the upper left-hand corner of each card is the number, expertly assigned by a cataloger at the Library of Congress, 973.7, perhaps with a few more decimals for specificity. The relief is almost overwhelming. The days of work have been reduced to a few hours of simply filing the cards into your beautiful oak cabinet, which you probably bought from the library bureau. The cost of buying the pre-printed cards is a tiny fraction of the cost of your own labor. It's an economic no-brainer. Here we see a quirky and often overlooked fact of technological adoption. Convenience is the ultimate killer. Libraries didn't adopt the Dewey system just because it was intellectually elegant. They adopted it because it was cheap and easy. The Library of Congress, by choosing Dewey as one of its primary classification standards for these printed cards, essentially gave your system its seal of approval. It made your system the path of least resistance. To invent your own system, or to use a competitor's, would mean you couldn't take advantage of this incredible time-saving service. You would be choosing to do things the hard way. And this is where historical debate about your legacy gains a new dimension. How much of your system's success was due to its own inherent genius, and how much was due to this brilliant, pragmatic infrastructure that grew up around it. Some scholars argue that the system itself is what mattered. It was flexible and logical, which is why the Library of Congress chose it in the first place. The printed cards were just a consequence of its superiority. But other historians argue that the opposite is true. They contend that the system had plenty of flaws like its bias in the 200 seconds, but its victory was secured not by its philosophical perfection, but by its economic and logistical advantages. The victory of the standard card was the victory of the system. In this view, you weren't just a theorist. You were a master of supply-chain logistics. You understood that to change the world, you don't just need a better idea, you need a better workflow. As you stand there in your small library, sliding the crisp new cards into the drawer, you don't care about these debates. All you know is that your job has been made immeasurably easier. Your backlog is gone. You have more time to help patrons, to recommend books, to actually be a librarian. The little numbers in the corner of the card are no longer a chore you have to create, but a gift you have received. They are a sign that you are part of something larger, a great, interconnected network of libraries all speaking the same quiet, orderly language. The victory is silent, but it is absolute. It's a victory on a million little pieces of cardstock. Your system is now spreading like a self-replicating organism, carried on a river of standardized cards. It feels triumphant. It feels complete. From the grand halls of new Carnegie libraries to the dusty shelves of small town reading rooms, your numbers are bringing a unified order to the nation's knowledge. But even as the system becomes the standard, the quiet, persistent unease begins to surface in one particular section of the library. It's a place of passion, of national pride, of artistic identity. It's the 800 seconds. It's the home you made for literature. From the very beginning, your design for the 800 seconds was clean, logical, and followed the same principle as the rest of your system. You decided to classify literature not by the country it came from, not by the time period it was written in, but by the language in which it was written, to your mind. This was the only rational choice. Language is the fundamental medium of literature. It is its most essential, defining characteristic. So you laid it out with your usual crisp precision. 810 American literature, 820 English literature, 830 German literature, 840 French literature, 850 Italian literature, 860 Spanish literature, 870 Latin literature, 880 Greek literature. It seems straightforward enough. It's a beautifully consistent application of your core principle. But as your system is adopted around the world, this is where the first major cracks in its universal facade begin to appear. The problem is that while language is a tidy category for a linguist, it's a deeply unsatisfying one for a reader or a scholar. Let's say you are a student in a newly Dewey Canadian library. You are studying your nation's literature. You go to the stacks, and you find that there is no Canadian literature section. Why? Because some Canadian authors write in English, and some write in French. So Margaret Atwood's novels are placed in 819, a subdivision you later added for English-language literature from outside the US/UK, while Gabrielle Roy's novels are shelved far away in 840, alongside books from France. To find the literature of your own country, you have to go to two completely different places. The library, in its effort to be logical by your standard, has become illogical to its actual users. This is a mainstream and enduring criticism of your system. Your rigid adherence to language as the primary divider creates all sorts of awkward and counter-intuitive arrangements. An Irish poet like W.B. Yeats, a foundational figure of Irish national identity, ends up in 821, the section for English poetry, right next two poets from London, a novelist from Argentina and a novelist from Spain are shelved together in the 860 seconds. Despite their vastly different cultural contexts, the system prioritizes linguistic heritage over national and cultural identity. This leads us to a quirky and revealing fact about how librarians have had to fix your system over the years. In many libraries in countries like Canada, Australia, or South Africa, you will find that the librarians have simply defied you. They will take all the books by their national authors from the 810 seconds, 820 seconds, and 840 seconds, and put them all together in one local authors section. They sacrifice your logical purity for the sake of user-friendly common sense. It's a quiet, respectful rebellion that happens every day in the stacks. And this, of course, is the source of another rich historical debate. Was your design for the 800 seconds a simple intellectual error, a place where your love of abstract categories blinded you to the practical needs of readers? Or was it, once again, a reflection of your inherent cultural biases? The argument for the latter is compelling. Look at the numbers. 810 is for American literature, 820 for English, 830 for German, 840 for French. The major Western European languages get their own privileged divisions. But what about the rest of the world? The entire continent of Africa, with its thousands of languages and rich literary traditions, is largely relegated to the 896 section. All of the diverse literatures of East and Southeast Asia are often grouped together. Critics argue that this isn't just a matter of inefficient organization. It's a form of intellectual colonialism baked into the very structure of the system. It creates a hierarchy where certain literary traditions are presented as primary and universal, while others are grouped together into a miscellaneous other. The system, they argue, doesn't just classify books. It subtly teaches the user about what literature is considered important. The counter-argument is, as always, rooted in pragmatism. Your defenders would say that you were designing a system in 1876 America. The vast majority of literary works in your library were from these Western traditions. You were simply mapping the world as you and your collection knew it. You couldn't be expected to have a deep knowledge of Pan-African literature, a field that didn't even exist as a formal discipline yet. You, of course, would have been baffled by this debate. To you, the logic was sound. Language is paramount. But as the sun sets on the 19th century and rises on a more complex, post-colonial 20th century, the beautiful simplicity of your 800 seconds begins to look like a cage, one that struggles to contain the rich, messy, multilingual reality of the world's stories. The unease you uncovered in the 800 seconds section is more than just an internal problem. It's a preview of what's to come, because your system, bursting with the confidence of its American success, is about to go international. It's time for it to leave home, to cross the oceans and test its claim of being a universal language against the vast, complex, and deeply different intellectual traditions of the world. The spread happens quickly, often riding the waves of colonial power and cultural influence. British librarians, trained in American methods, bring it to outposts of the empire in India, Australia, and South Africa. American missionaries, establishing schools and universities in China and the Middle East, bring your little blue book of numbers with them. It is adopted in over 135 countries, a staggering testament to its perceived efficiency. On the surface, it's a story of incredible success. Your system is becoming the global standard for organizing knowledge. But now, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a librarian in Bombay in the late 1890s. You have just been told that your library will be modernized using this new American system. You are dutiful. You are professional. You begin the process, and almost immediately, you run into a wall of absurdity. You turn to the 200 seconds, the section for religion. Your library is filled with sacred Hindu texts, the Vedas, the Upanishads. You have vast collections of Buddhist sutras and Islamic jurisprudence. These are the core of your culture's intellectual and spiritual heritage. You look at the Dewey schedule, you see that Christianity is given almost 84 divisions. And you see that your entire collection, all of Hinduism, all of Buddhism, all of Islam must be crammed into the 290 seconds. To follow this system is to shrink your world and marginalize your own heritage. The frustration is immense. You move to the 900 seconds. History. You have shelves groaning with the weight of India's millennia minus long history, the Maurya Empire, the Gupta period, the Mughals. You look at the schedule. 940 is for Europe. 970 is for North America. Both are given vast, expansive numerical landscapes. The entire history of Asia is condensed into the 950 seconds. Your country is sprawling. Epic story is given a tiny numerical closet to live in. This is the central, unshakable historical fact of your system's global journey. It's a Mary-centric. Eurocentric bias makes it a profoundly awkward, and at times insulting, thick for other cultures. It is not a universal language. It is the language of a 19th-century American Protestant, exported to the world. And this is where we see a wonderfully quirky and creative human response to a rigid system. Librarians around the world didn't just give up. They became hackers. They started to perform an authorized surgery on your system. They began creating what are known as expansions. A group of librarians in India might take the number for Buddhism, 294.3, and add their own, much more detailed decimal subdivisions to properly classify their extensive collections. They keep your foundation, but they build their own house on top of it. These home-made expansions are a testament to both the system's flexibility and its fundamental inadequacy. But for some, modification was enough. The system was too flawed at its core. This leads to one of the great stories of intellectual rebellion in library history. In the 1930 seconds, an Indian mathematician and librarian named S. R. Ranganathan, who had studied the Dewey system in London, found it so illogical for an Indian context that he decided to do something about it. He invented a completely new classification system from scratch, the colon classification. It's a fascinating, complex system that uses colons and other punctuation to link different facets of a subject. It was a direct intellectual response to your system's failures, an attempt to create a truly logical and less biased framework. It never achieved the global reach of Dewey, but it remains a powerful symbol of resistance. And this brings us to the quiet debate that still echoes in the halls of international library conferences. What was the Dewey Decimal System's role in the world? Was it a benevolent gift of modernity? An invaluable tool that helped countless developing nations organize their knowledge and build modern libraries where none existed before? From this perspective, its flaws were minor compared to its enormous benefit of bringing a workable, standardized order to the world. Or, as other post-colonial scholars argue, was your system a Trojan horse of cultural imperialism? Was it a subtle but powerful tool that imposed a Western way of seeing and organizing the world onto other cultures? Did it, by its very structure, teach generations of readers in Africa and Asia that their own history, religion, and literature were secondary to those of Europe and North America? In this view, the numbers weren't just a neutral tool. They were carriers of a cultural blueprint, a quiet form of intellectual colonization. The truth is likely somewhere in the gray, murky middle. For many, it was a practical tool they adapted as best they could, that as you watch your numbers travel the globe, you can no longer hold on to the naive belief that they are a perfect, universal language. They are a reflection of you and your world, and when your world meets the rest of the world, something has to give. While your system is wrestling with its identity on the world stage, a new challenge is rising back home in America. It's not a rebellion from a foreign culture. It's a challenge from your own kind, from the heart of the American library establishment. It's quiet, it's professional, but it's the most significant threat your system has ever faced. It comes from the biggest, most important library in the nation, the Library of Congress. You have to understand the sheer scale of this place. The Library of Congress isn't like the Amherst Library you first organized. It's not even like Columbia. It is a beast, a behemoth. It is the nation's library, and by the end of the 19th century, its collection is growing at a terrifying rate, millions of items. It acquires not just one copy of a book, but multiple. It collects maps, photographs, musical scores, government documents. It is an ocean of information. The librarians there, initially, had tried to use your system. They were selling those Dewey numbered cards to libraries across the country. After all, but they started to run into problems. Big problem. Your system, designed for the general public and college libraries, was elegant and simple, but for a massive, research-focused institution like the Library of Congress, simple started to look like a weakness. Let's take an example. You have a shelf of books on the history of the American Civil War. In your system, they all get a number around 973.7, and for a public library with maybe 50 books on the topic, that's perfectly fine. But the Library of Congress has thousands of books on the Civil War. It has books on specific battles, on individual generals, on the economic impact on the South, on the role of naval blockades, on medical care and field hospitals, cramming them all into the 973.7 section, even with long decimal additions, started to become unwieldy. The numbers became comically long, and the categories still didn't feel specific enough for their deep, scholarly needs. So, in 1897, the librarians at the Library of Congress made a momentous decision. They decided to scrap Dewey and build their own system from the ground up. This would become the Library of Congress Classification, or LCC. You can imagine this as the moment the professional heavyweight enters the ring. The LCC was not designed for elegance or for teaching the public about the structure of knowledge. It was designed for one thing and one thing only: to manage a gigantic, constantly growing collection as efficiently as possible. It's a quirky and telling fact that the LCC system doesn't use pure numbers like yours. It uses a combination of letters and numbers. It has 21 main classes, designated by single letters of the alphabet. H is for social sciences, N is for fine arts, Q is for science, T is for technology, and unlike your system, the classes aren't based on a grand philosophical theory. They are based on a very practical consideration: what the Library of Congress actually had in its collection. They looked at their shelves and built the system around the books, not the other way around. It was a system born of pragmatism, not idealism. This is where the great, quiet rivalry in American libraries begins. The Dewey Decimal System versus the Library of Congress Classification. It's a debate that every single librarian in America has an opinion on. It's like asking a mechanic whether they prefer Ford or Chevy. On one side, you have your system. Do you see it? Its defenders praise its beautiful, hierarchical logic. The numbers mean something. You can see the relationships between subjects. It's intuitive, memorable, and brilliant for browsing in a public or school library, where a patron might want to see all the science books grouped together. It's a teaching tool. On the other side, you have the LCC. Its proponents admit it's not as intellectually pretty. The call numbers, like PS 3554, U47A6 1990, don't have that same elegant, narrative quality, but they argue that it is infinitely more flexible and scalable. Because it has more main classes and uses a mix of letters and numbers, it can create shorter call numbers for much more specific subjects. It's the system for serious, heavy-duty research. It's the system for the big league. The historical debate isn't about which system is better. It's about what a classification system is fundamentally for. Is it, as you believe, a philosophical map of the world that should be logical and teachable? Is its primary user the public, the browser, the lifelong learner? If so, Dewey is the clear winner. Or is a classification system just a brute minus for stool for shelf location? A mark and park system whose only job is to give a unique address to every single item in an enormous collection, so it can be found again quickly? Is its primary user the librarian, the cataloger, the person who has to manage millions of items? If so, The LCC is the undisputed champion. The result is a de facto split in the American library world that persists to this day. Walk into almost any public library or K-12 school library in the United States, and you will find your numbers on the spines. The Dewey Decimal System won the hearts of the public. But walk into almost any university or major research library, and you will find the letters and numbers of the Library of Congress classification. The LCC won the minds of the academics. You didn't lose the war, but you didn't quite win it either. You now had to share your kingdom. The rivalry with the Library of Congress settles into a long, quiet truce. The kingdom of knowledge is divided, and a kind of stable peace reigns. Your system is the ruler of the public square and the schoolhouse. The LCC is the master of the university and the research institution. Decades pass. The ink on the catalogue cards fades slightly. The oak cabinets gain a rich patina. The world feels orderly, your legacy secure. But as the 20th century breathes its last, a new ghost enters the library. It doesn't arrive in a crate. It has no weight, no pages, no binding. It is a great, humming, invisible cloud of information that begins to seep through the walls. At first it's a curiosity, a tool for the librarians themselves. It's called the Internet, and it's about to present you with the most profound philosophical and practical challenge your system has ever faced. You built a system for things you could touch, for books, for pamphlets, for physical objects that sit on a physical shelf. You are now faced with a question that strikes at the very heart of your life's work. How do you assign a number, a physical location, to something that exists everywhere and nowhere at once? The first problem is the website. A resource like Wikipedia appears. It is, for all intents and purposes, a massive, constantly changing encyclopedia. Your first instinct is clearing Sayao for general American encyclopedias. But a book, once printed, is static. Wikipedia changes every second. Do you catalog the version from this morning, from this afternoon? And what about the endless links leading away from it? A single article can lead you to art, to science, to history. The object you are trying to classify refuses to stand still. Librarians who are the custodians of your system make a brave decision. They reaffirm the choice made decades earlier for the first hulking computers, the Internet, as a technology, will live in the 0 seconds, specifically in the subsequences of physics dedicated computer science. But this is a home for the Internet as a subject. A book about the Internet goes in for 0.0. This doesn't solve the problem how to classify the boundless content on the Internet. Then come the new formats, things you could never have dreamed of. The podcast. Is a weekly podcast about Roman history a periodical, like a magazine, the Wording? Or is its subject-ness more important than its format-ness, meaning it belongs in 937? And what of its ephemeral nature? The RSS feed is a location, of a sort, but it's not a shelf. And this brings us to the ultimate, quirky challenge that causes a special kind of headache for modern Dewey librarians, the video game. A video game is a cultural object of immense popularity and growing artistic importance. It needs to be in the library. But what is it? Is it a piece of software? If so, it belongs in the 5.3 seconds computer software. Is it a form of recreation? A game like chess or baseball? That would put it in the 790 seconds, alongside sports. The latest edition of Dewey actually created a spot for it at 790 for Lingdemba. But many video games have complex stories, characters, and dialogue. Are they not a form of literature, a new kind of interactive fiction? Should they have a home in the 800 seconds? And their visuals can be stunning works of art. Does that mean they have a claim on the 700 seconds? Librarians have passionate, genuine debates about this. Classifying a video game isn't just a technical problem. It's a philosophical one that forces you to ask what this new art form truly is. And this leads to the biggest, most fundamental debate of all, one that historians and information scientists are wrestling with right now. Is a system like yours, a hierarchical, top minus down, pre minus coordinated index, even relevant in the age of Google? One side argues that your system is obsolete. It's an elegant relic, a horse minus and minus buggy in the age of the automobile. Why, they ask, do we need a librarian to spend hours finding the perfect number for a resource when a user can just type French cooking into a search bar and get a million results instantly? In this view, the future of information retrieval is not in numbered hierarchies, but in keywords, metadata tags, and user minus generated focus noise. It's bottom minus up, not top minus down. But another school of thought argues that your system is more important now than ever before. The problem with a Google search, they say, is that it gives you a million results, but it doesn't give you context or quality. It's a fire hose of information with no filter. Your system, on the other hand, is a curated map, a book that has been given the number 641.59. For 4, has been vetted by a librarian. It has been placed in its proper intellectual context. We know it's its next to other cookbooks, and we know it's a part of the broader world of applied sciences, the 600 seconds. In an age of information, chaos and fake news, they argue the structured, trustworthy, human minus curated order that your system provides is not an obstacle. It's a vital lifeline. It helps us see the forest for the trees. You are left watching this battle from a distance. The world you organized is gone, replaced by a shimmering, chaotic, and infinitely larger one. Your numbers, once the undisputed kings of the library, now seem small and quiet, and yet they persist. They are still there, on the spines of books, a quiet promise of order in a world that seems to have less and less of it. Close your eyes for a moment and let the buzzing chaos of the digital world fade away. Let the infinite scroll of search results, the million glowing tabs, the endless stream of notifications all dissolve into a quiet hum and then into silence. The problem of organizing the internet is a frantic, dizzying one. But now, you are going to leave it behind. You are going to stand up, walk out the door, and go to a place that still moves at the speed of paper. You are going to the library. You are not going with a specific mission. You don't have a research paper due. You aren't looking for one particular book. You are going simply to wander. You push open the heavy glass door and the air changes. It's cooler, quieter, and it carries that faint, comforting scent of paper, binding glue, and decades of quiet contemplation. You walk past the circulation desk, give a small nod to the librarian, and head into the stacks. This is where you rediscover the true, quiet magic of your system. Now though, not as a theorist, not as a crusader, but as a simple, curious human being, you find yourself in the 500 seconds, the world of science. You're idly looking for something on geology. Maybe you run your fingers along the spines in the 550 seconds section. You see the titles blur past, and then your eye catches something on the shelf just below, a book with a beautiful, stark cover showing a single bat in flight. It's in the 599 seconds, the section for mammals. You weren't thinking about bats. You would never have typed bats into a search bar, but because your system places geology 550 in biology, 570 in zoology, 590, all together in the grand neighborhood of science. This book about bats was living right next door to the rocks you were thinking about. You pull it out. The cover is smooth. You flip through the pages, seeing stunning photographs and diagrams of wing structures. You had no idea there were so many different kinds of bats. You've just experienced its serendipity, the happy accident. This is the mainstream, universally beloved feature of a physical library organized by subject. It's the magic of adjacent discovery. A keyword search is a laser beam. It finds you exactly what you asked for. But browsing a physical shelf is like taking a walk through a forest. You might be heading for a particular landmark, but you notice the flowers, the mushrooms, the strange bird nesting in a tree along the way. Your system, by grouping like with like, creates a curated landscape for these accidental encounters. You might go for a book on the French Revolution 940 or .04 and come home with a biography of Marie Antoinette 144.03 because they were sitting side minus by minus by minus. Here's a wonderfully quirky and meditative fact about the life of a library, the task of shelf-reading. This is what librarians and pages do for us every week. They walk slowly along the stacks, their eyes scanning the call numbers, their fingers gently touching the spines, making sure every single book is in its precise numerical order. They are the quiet guardians of your system. They ensure that 780 rock music is correctly nestled between 780 for folk music and 785 instrumental ensembles. And in this slow, almost N-like process, they become masters of adjacency. They see the unexpected connections. They know that the books on etiquette 395 live surprisingly close to the books on folklore Sanjoba. Shelf-reading is the act of maintaining the very structure that allows for serendipity to happen. But is this romantic notion of the happy accident truly valuable, or is it just an inefficient holdover from a bygone era? This is where a very real debate among information scientists is quietly taking place. One side argues passionately for the cognitive importance of browsing. They say that true learning and innovation often happen when you make unexpected connections between fields. Serendipity, in this view, isn't just a happy accident. It's a vital intellectual process that expands your horizons in ways a targeted search never could. It combats the intellectual filter bubble that algorithms create. The other side, however, argues that this is a lovely, but ultimately inefficient, fantasy. They contend that a well-structured database with powerful search tools is far more effective at helping a user make cross-disciplinary connections. If you want to connect French history and the history of cooking, you can search for both terms. You don't have to hope you stumble upon the right book on the right shelf. They see browsing as a slow, haphazard process that privileges physical proximity over true intellectual connection. In their view, the magic of the happy accident is no match for the power of a well-executed search query. You are not thinking about any of that right now. You are standing in the quiet of the 500 seconds with a book about bats in your hands. A book you did not know you wanted to read until you saw it. You tuck it under your arm and continue to wander. The light from the high windows is soft and hazy. The silence isn't an empty silence. It's a silence filled with the potential of a million different stories, a million different ideas, all waiting patiently for someone to stumble upon them. You feel a sense of peace, a sense of discovery, that a screen full of hyperlinks could never provide. You have come home. You've come to the end of your walk. You're back at the front of the library, the book about bats still tucked under your arm. You check it out, the librarian giving you a warm, familiar smile. As you step back out into the evening air, the world seems a little different, a little quieter, a little more connected than it was before. You have walked through the life of a system, an idea made of numbers that tried to contain the entire world. You saw its brilliant birth, its lonely struggles, its flawed triumphs, and its quiet, ongoing rivalries. And so we come to the final, lingering question, the one that hangs in the air like dust in the setting sun. What is the ultimate fate of your system in a future that seems destined to be entirely digital, where physical books may become beautiful artifacts rather than primary sources of information? Do your numbers have a role to play? Will they fade away, a quaint relic of an analog age? The first thing you need to know is that your system is not dead. It is not a fossil. This is a core fact that surprises many people. The Dewey Decimal Classification is still a living, breathing thing. Its care and maintenance are now in the hands of a global library cooperative called the OCLC, the Online Computer Library Center. Hidden away from public view, a small, dedicated team of editors, the direct intellectual descendants of you, Melvil, are at work every single day. They are the ones still trying to map the ever-exploding universe of knowledge. And this is where we find a final, wonderfully human, quirky fact. These editors hold regular meetings to debate the placement of new concepts. You can imagine them in a quiet conference room, perhaps with coffee and spreadsheets, having serious, scholarly arguments about where to classify memes. Is it a form of communication, a kind of folklore, or a feature of internet culture, 6.7. They are the ones who had to create a home for podcasting, cryptocurrency, and self-minus driving cars. Your system, born in the age of the steam engine, is now grappling with the age of the algorithm, and it is doing so through the careful, considered work of human beings. This work ensures the system survives, but it does not answer the question of its long-term relevance, and that is where the final historical debate lies. It's a debate happening right now, in library science journals and at information theory conferences. One side argues that your system's destiny is to become a legacy system. It will continue to be used for physical books because it works, and it would be far too expensive to classify the millions of volumes that already bear your numbers. But in the digital realm, it will be superseded by more flexible, dynamic systems like keyword tagging, semantic analysis, and AI-driven information retrieval. The future, they say, is search, not browsing. Structure will be fluid and created on the fly, not determined by a century-old hierarchy. But the other side argues that this view is short-sighted. They contend that the true value of your system was never just about finding a specific book on a shelf. It was about creating a map, a logical framework for understanding how ideas relate to one another. And in a world drowning in an ocean of disorganized data, a logical map is more valuable than ever. They argue that your system's structure could find a new, vital purpose in the digital age. Imagine a search engine that didn't just give you a list of links, but organized them according to the Dewey framework, allowing you to see the context, to browse the digital shelf, to have those same happy accidents you had in the physical stacks. In this view, your system is not a relic. It is a foundational logic, a time-tested structure that could bring order to the digital chaos, perhaps even teaching the AIs how to see the world not just as data, but as knowledge. You don't know the answer. You can't. Your work is done. You created the numbers. You gave them to the world. And now, like a message in a bottle thrown into a vast ocean, its final destination is out of your hands. You look at the call number on the spine of the book you're holding. A simple string of numbers and a decimal point. A quiet, humble, and infinitely powerful idea. It feels like a fitting legacy. A quiet attempt at order in a beautiful, chaotic world. The lights in the library are dimming now, the tall windows turning into deep, dark mirrors reflecting the last vestiges of twilight. The daytime sounds of shuffling feet and turning pages have faded away, replaced by the low, gentle hum of the building itself, a sound like a slow, deep breath. The last few patrons have gathered their things, their footsteps echoing softly as they head for the door, leaving the books to their silent, slumbering watch. You can feel the day releasing its hold, the sharp edges of your thoughts beginning to soften and blur. The journey through the decades, through the aisles of history and ideas, has left you feeling calm and settled and wonderfully tired. The frantic energy of creation, the sting of rejection, the quiet satisfaction of a system clicking into place, all of it is now receding, becoming part of a gentle, flowing current that is slowly carrying you towards sleep. The numbers themselves seem to be dissolving. 584.15, 973.7. They float for a moment in your mind's eye, no longer sharp labels on a spine, but soft, glowing embers in the darkness. They drift apart, losing their structure, becoming just a peaceful, random scattering of lights, like distant stars in a clear, deep night sky. The library is no longer a place of strict order, but a vast, quiet landscape of dreams. You are already drifting through it, your breath slowing, evening out, as the last of the day's awareness gently fades to breath.